Hello my lovely friends, and welcome back to another money video. Today we're going to be talking about something that's really near and dear to my heart, and I think I mention it in like at least 90% of my videos, and as you've guessed it is budgeting. And I think that it's really timely that as people are thinking about their financial goals and thinking about what it is that they would like to achieve for 2021 and sitting and thinking about how they can make their finances a little bit better, whether it be improve their financial position, maybe change a few spending habits, or just if you're dreaming about a dreamy vacation somewhere or buying a house, then it's really important that you have a budget in place that will help you get to those goals that bit quicker. And so today I really wanted to share with you the exact method that I use to not only budget my money on a month-to-month basis, but also track how I'm spending my money, because sometimes there can be a little bit of a mismatch between the two, because ideally you have an idea of how you should be spending your money, but the reality is if you haven't addressed your spending habits, or if you haven't changed the way you purchase certain things, or if you've forgotten about certain subscriptions, then actually the way your money comes out of your account can be very different to the way you budget it. So I like to have a budget that not only looks at how I'm going to plan my money, but also tracks the exact method that I'm spending my money and capture the difference. And that way, when it comes to, for example, thinking of ways to save money, or even just to places where I can cut down on a couple of my expenses, then I have something visually available for me to have a look at. So before we go ahead and get started with this budget, I think the first and foremost important thing is to make sure that you actually have some financial goals set down. And if you're looking for inspiration, then I do have a video that I've dedicated sharing with you some of the financial and money goals that you can set for yourself in 2021 that are super realistic and super achievable. So I will make sure to link that up here and also link that in the description below. And the reason why I think it's so important to make sure that you start off with writing your goals is because it will not only make budgeting that more exciting when you have an end goal and a prize at the end of the year, but it will also act as a motivation and inspiration, especially during those times when you don't feel like budgeting. And so that's why I have adopted, and I genuinely love, a budget, because it helps me to intentionally plan my money in the hopes of reaching my financial goals. The way my budgeting spreadsheet is set up is actually set up on two main key principles. The first one is the zero budgeting method, and the second one is the 50-30-20 rule. So the reason why I use the zero budgeting method is because I genuinely believe that I want to be as intentional as I can, and I want to take control of my finances that way. I want to allocate every single pound and every single cent to have a mission to accomplish. And then I use the 50-30-20 rule because it simply states that 50% of your income should go towards everything that you need. So that could be your housing, your food, your transport. These are basic things that you need to survive. And then 30% goes towards some flexible expenses, and these are just things that are fun and things that you personally enjoy. And then 20% of your income is allocated towards your savings. So these two principles are what I've used to build up this spreadsheet, and it's the way that I budget my money. So let's just hop onto the computer and see what this budget spreadsheet looks like. So what you have is a full year view of how you have planned your money, as well as how you have actually spent your money. And the interesting thing is, what I like to do is I always like to have a summary tab, which basically shows me exactly how I've spent on those categories that we talked about earlier. So because we're using the 50-30-20 rule, we're trying to capture how much money we're spending on our fixed expenses, how much money we're spending on our flexible expenses, and how much money we're spending on our savings. And so what I want to do is I want to capture the whole numbers as well as the percentages of those, so that I can know where I am in terms of that framework, whether or not there could be some shift somewhere where I can try and get in the range of 50-30-20, remembering that actually in reality that might look slightly different. But I know that it's just a guiding principle and it's something that I'm working towards. But what I really like is that you get an idea of how your money is distributed across all those different categories. And as you can see, I've color coded it so that if it's, if you're spending way more than you have planned for, then it highlights that to you. And if you're underspending and there are opportunities, you know, where you can maximize on that, then it highlights that to you as well as a green as well. So we'll come back to the summary tab because it's more interesting to look at that when it's completely filled out. But what you'll see is, like I said, I've categorized this in 3 different areas, but we'll start off with the income. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually using the example of the national wage across the country, which is around, I think, £29,000 a year, just because I thought that is more realistic and it will highlight exactly how I would budget my money at that point. Just recognizing that actually I've got some slightly inflated figures just because of where I am, and I wanted to make this as realistic as possible in the hopes that actually I will help as many people as I can. So we're going to be using your wages after tax because this is exactly what is hitting your bank account, and your bank account is what I'm supposing you'll be using as a reference to fill this out. So what I would naturally do is at the beginning of the month, maybe at the end of the previous month actually, is now sit down and look a month in ahead, how would I like to distribute my money? And that's what we're going to do together here. And maybe I'll do a more detailed video later on explaining everything around it, and also a detailed video of how you can find ways to save money as well. But in this instance, I'm just going to show you how I would budget my money. So I would sit down and I would go through. So for example, if you're on 28,000, I'm assuming you'll be making 1,900, and I've pre-filled these ahead of time just so that I can save when you're hearing clanking on the keyboard. So if you're on a salary of about 28,000, 29,000, you're probably bringing home about 1,900 a month. And then if you have a child, then I'm assuming you might be getting some child benefits. So I've kind of made it like a mix between the national average as well as some of my personal circumstances, and we'll bring that in there. And so what we're trying to capture is as everything that's coming into your account is coming in as income. If you're a single parent, you might be getting some child support, and so you would include that information on here. And of course, if you've got side hustles or getting dividends, or if it's, for example, like your birthday and you've gotten a gift, you would include that in there, and so that would give you exactly how much you are earning. I would for now ignore the tab that says difference, because that's gonna, like I said, highlight to you where there are any differences between what you're budgeting and what you're actually spending. Then I would go to my fixed income. So I've basically based this on someone living in the UK, where I think these are the average prices most people pay. So you're paying, let's say you're paying a mortgage of 700, you've not got ground rent or service charge, but if you are in a flat, that's something that you might want to include. Then you're paying council tax. I've put £75 in there, which I think is roughly about correct. And of course, if you've got multiple incomes, then you can either do this budget for both of your incomes, or you can do it split between the responsibilities of both of you. Then you're paying gas and electricity of £30. You've got your water bill. Then let's say you've got a mobile phone contract, that you've got the latest phone, so you're paying £41, which I think is actually quite average for most people who renew their contracts and get a good deal. So that might be something worth looking out for later on. And then let's say you're paying for TV license, and you've got, like, for example, like a Sky TV package or a Now TV package or something like that. So I put £30 for that. These are just figures on the top of my head, so please, if they're wrong, please don't come for me. Then let's say you've got a subscription to Netflix because you also enjoy a little bit of Netflix, and then you're paying for your internet or your home connection. And then you've got some home assurance as well. So then that now tells us exactly how much you are spending for your home. These are your fixed expenses. Remember, we're trying to work towards 50%, but that's just the guiding principle. So we know that 49% of our income, almost 50% of our income, is going towards home. Then let's say you spend about £250 on your groceries, so you would enter that in there. And then you're spending about, you think you'll spend about £65 on takeaways. And so in totality, you're spending about £315 a month on food. But you don't think you're going to be dining or eating out, just because of the year we are currently in, the word that won't be said. And then if we move on to transport, I'm assuming that you haven't got car finance, but you own your car outright. But if you did have finance, then you would put that figure, the monthly repayments, on there. And then you've got your insurance. So I've put in £55 for your insurance. And then your fuel, remember you're planning ahead, so you think you'll use about £30. Maybe you use more than that, but because maybe you're working from home and things are the way they are, you're only planning to spend about £30 on fuel. Then for your MOT, now for most people, they will pay that off as a one-off fee that you pay when you've booked your MOT. And so I haven't included that in there, but if you were to be doing your MOT in January, then you would include that figure in there. But let's say that, you know, your MOT is not due for another 3 months, so you want to include that in there. And then let's say, for example, you pay tax. Now I know there is an option between, for your road tax, whether or not you can pay a one-off payment or you can pay monthly, but my understanding is most people pay as a one-off payment, or at least every 6 months. But I've based this on my car, but I pay £30 for the entire year for my car. Now I don't have a rough estimate of what that would be for anybody else's car, but I just took a rough estimate of mine, and I usually tend to pay mine off as a one-off fee because it's relatively quite cheap. And then you've also got breakdown cover, and you do that on a month by month basis. But let's say, for example, you don't anticipate any repairs, you're working from home, so you're not taking the train or the bus, you're not taking an Uber or taxi, so you're not anticipating that you'll be using public transport in any way. So then that means that we are budgeting around £120, or 6% of our income is going towards our transport costs. And then let's say you do have a credit card debt. You've got a credit card with an outstanding balance, and so for now you're paying £50 a month as your repayment. And so we've captured that in there, but recognizing that you might have additional credit cards, so I would just add another line for however many credit cards you have, or however many personal loans you have, and just include them on there, and it would just automatically tally it up. And so now we've got a picture of exactly how much it is that we are spending on our fixed expenses, and that's broken down by each of these categories. So we know of the 1,900 we're bringing in, or 1,982 that we're bringing in, £1,467 is going towards our fixed expenses. Then now we can move towards our flexible expenses. So the first area that I've got is our charity and gifts, because I genuinely believe whether you have a faith or not, it's really good, and it's really important to make sure that you are giving, because it's genuinely just good to give. And I generally have a rule of thumb that you should give 10% of your income, so that's why I've included in there. But you don't have to, it's completely up to you. But if you were giving, it doesn't necessarily have to be a tithe, it can be a charitable donation, then you would include that in here. And then, like I said, you might have some fun and entertainment stuff that you like for yourself that you might want to capture in here. So for example, it might be like, you know, you purchase like some self-care stuff that you don't necessarily always buy with your groceries. And this could be like getting your nails done, or getting just personal items that you like for you. So I've included, you plan that you're only going to spend about £50 on that. You're going to spend about £30 on your hair care products, whatever shampoo it is that you like, whatever conditioner it is that you like, or any additional hair care products that you may need. Then let's say you actually have an Amazon Prime subscription, and that's on a monthly basis, so you pay for that because you like your packages to come quickly. And then let's say you've also got an ASOS annual subscription that you quite enjoy. Now the good thing about this one is that it's annually, so you only pay it once and it's covering you for the entire year. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then we've got maybe some in-app purchases that you like, so maybe you might put some money towards that, or it might actually include other things, like for example, if you've got Spotify or any additional subscriptions that you like, you might put them in here as well. And then I've put my dependents. Now this one could go either in the fixed expenses or it can go in the flexible expenses. And the reason why I put it in the flexible expenses for now is because I have a 3-year-old son, so a lot of this stuff, the first 3 lines, are actually a flexible option for me because I'm working from home. I don't necessarily have to carry any costs, but I do recognize that actually if you do have a baby under 3, then you will have to pay nursery fees. So you might include that as a fixed expense, but for now this is where you would include it. And then let's say, for example, you've decided that, you know, you're going to spend a little bit of money, but not as much as you usually do on clothes. So you budget out £50 to treat yourself and treat your child to some clothes. And then if you've signed your child up for some extracurricular activities, like for example football club or something like that, so I've just put in £35 for extracurricular activities, and some additional toys and games for your kid here. Another thing to point out is if you pay child support out to your co-parent, then you would also include that in here. And obviously if you've got pet insurance or pet care or pet food, then include that in here as well. So for now we're saying that we're spending about £95 on our dependents, and it's about 4% of our income. Then I have another category called miscellaneous, and this is just to capture everything that kind of pops up within the month that you didn't anticipate you'd be spending money on, but you do end up spending some money on it. And as we're going through the actual spend, I will include what I think a potential example could be in there. But for now, you haven't budgeted for it because it's miscellaneous. It's not something that you were expecting will come on a month-to-month basis. So now you have your total flexible expenses. So remember, we had budgeted for 30%, and actually at this point in time we're coming well below that, so we're only spending 20% of our income on our flexible expenses, which is a good thing, right? And then what you now have is your remaining funds. Remember, this is a zero-based budget, so we're trying to give every single pound and pence or dollar or yen, whatever currency you're using, we're trying to give it all a purpose and to give it a mission. So now that I know I had 1,982 coming into my account, I've already allocated 1,860. Then I have £121 remaining to now put into my savings. Instead of going back to my flexible payments and then just saying, you know what, I'm going to buy more clothes or anything like that, I want to make an active step towards my savings. Remember, we have a 20% goal of our income to go into savings. Now, what I do that's a little bit different to some people is that I don't think you should put money into one generic savings account. And the reason for that is because I think if you have one generic savings account and you want to do something, you will dip in and out and you won't be able to achieve some of your other financial goals. So let's say, for example, one of my key goals is to make sure that I have a house deposit to buy my next house. If I have just one generic savings account where I put all my money in, should I have any issues with my car or any issues with, for example, the house, and I need to make repairs to that, that means I'm just going to go straight into that fund. And when it comes to buying my house, I don't have the sum that I need to purchase my house. So I have something called the sinking funds. And sinking funds are just simply different saving pots that you are utilizing to save for specific things. So I've listed out the key areas where I think most people will be thinking about, but also are really important to me. So, but you feel free to change this. So I do think you should have like a generic savings account or an ISA where money goes in, you don't touch it, you kind of just leave it in there, but it is nice to save. You have an emergency fund, which is really, really important to have. So you have money set aside for any emergency that comes up in an easily accessible fund. And then you have different pots for your different goals. So for example, if you want to buy a house, if you want to buy a car, or if you want to pay for a car, then you have money set aside for that. If you want to go on a holiday, have a holiday fund that you specifically put your money into. And then if you want to save for Christmas, I always think it's better to start saving for Christmas now than to fork out a bill later on. And then start to think about investing. I like to invest with trading 2-on-2, and you can start investing from as little as £1. But if you have a dedicated account where you can put money towards your savings, you can slowly start to grow that, and you can put money aside specifically for that. And then, like I said, if you have children, I think it's really, really important to invest money for your children or save money for your children. Another thing to mention is because it's a zero-based budget, we are going to divvy out the exact £121.53 into our different saving pots. So what I would do is, just to round it up, is put 53p in the general savings. Treat it like a penny jar if you must, and just put your money in there. You remember, this is just a savings account where you're just saving some money. It doesn't necessarily have a purpose, but it's just money that is set aside for that. And then the first thing that I think is super important, and you should always go put as much as you can into, is your emergency fund, because emergency rise up. And if you have a goal of getting to £1,000 or having 3 months worth of your income saved up, then the more you put into that, the quicker it is to reach that goal. So I would put £60 in there, and then for all the others, I would put some money towards my house deposit, I would put some money towards my kids' savings, and then your holiday fund, your Christmas pot or your Eid pot or your Hanukkah pot you'd put in there, and then I would put £15 towards investing as well. And that way you can see now you have basically, see that you've allocated every single amount. So if we go back up to the summary spreadsheet, this is now going to show you exactly what those percentages look like and what the whole numbers look like. So we know that we had £1,982. We've now allocated 1,467 towards our fixed expenses, 392 towards our flexible expenses, and 121 towards our savings, and that gives us these percentages. So 74% to fixed, 19% to flexible expenses, and 6% to our savings. And that's just represented in a chart, which I think is always nice to see where that is. And as you can imagine, as you fill this out throughout the year, you can see how those things shift and move, because I'm expecting they will shift and move as time goes on. So that's how you would budget, and you would do that for every single month, and you would basically allocate your money in that way. Then what I would do at the end of the month is simply just grab my phone, and I would basically go through it, and I would just write down how I spent my money. Let's fill it out and see what that might look like. So the opening balance is basically where our account sits at the beginning of the month. So let's say, for example, maybe over Christmas we overspent slightly, and maybe we spent £50 more than we had expected, and this could mean you end up with like going into £50 into your overdraft. And so we need to include that in here, because that's an overspend that we didn't anticipate we would have last month. Then obviously your wages will remain the same, or unless if you've had a pay rise, then you can include that in there. Your child benefit will remain the same. If you've got any additional, for example, if it was your birthday and you got £100, then you would, or for Christmas maybe you got £100 but you haven't spent it yet, you would include that in here. But for now I'm just going to assume you got gifts, like you didn't get any cash but what you did have was a slight overspend over Christmas, so we've included that in there. So you can see the difference now. We've already lost £50 of what we had anticipated in terms of our income, because we've got to cover that overdraft. Now I'm assuming that your fixed expenses will probably stay the same, because remember this is retrospective, so you're looking back, you haven't changed anything, you still got your same mobile phone contract, you are obviously paying your rent make sure you do that, you were paying for your internet and everything. Then now, because we're now in tier 4, we're more than tier 4, we're officially in lockdown. So maybe your groceries have gone up because you're going to be at home a lot more than usual. So let's say you end up spending £275, but actually you see a reduction in the amount of takeaways you are taking out. So maybe you've decided also, because you've got health and fitness goals, you've decided you're going to cook as much as you can, so you reduce the amount that you are going out for takeaway. Maybe you just have like a couple of cheeky takeaways throughout the month, and then you don't dine and eat out because everything is closed, right? So what we can see is actually we've seen a 25% increase in the amount. So remember, you had budgeted only £250, but you did overspend a little bit this month, so that highlights it to you. And also in your takeaways you've reduced that, and that highlights it to you. The good thing to remember is red is an overspend, green is an underspend. Then let's say everything remains practically the same. So let's say you still pay for your insurance, you pay your £55 as normal, and then because we are in lockdown, you're probably not going to be using your car at all, if any. So even though you've budgeted £30, maybe you actually only ended up spending £10 on your on your fuel. Let me not say petrol, because some people have diesel cars. You only ended up spending £10, and that's just basically to take you to the supermarket and back. And then you paid for your MOT and you paid for your breakdown cover. So you can see all of these things remain, but actually there's a £20 saving over there that we've captured now. Let's say you made your minimum repayment towards your credit card debt, so we've captured that. So we can see for each and every single one of these is a total, and we can see what percentage that equates to how much income you have. So for example, we had budgeted 6% of our income to go towards transport, but we've actually ended up only using 5% of our income. So those are things that I think are really, really interesting especially when you go back and you look at areas where you can make a difference. So now we see we've got our fixed expenses. We had budgeted £1,467, but we've actually only spent £1,427 despite starting off at a slightly lower income. So our actual spend is actually less than we anticipated. But in other months it might be more, so that's something to watch out for as well. Let's say you go ahead and you make your charity contribution. The only reason this is flagging up as red in this particular area is because our income is slightly less, so it looks like a higher percentage is going towards that, but in reality it's only because we had that £50 overdraft at the beginning of the month to catch up. Then let's say we still spend £50 on our personal items and we buy ourselves nice things. Say we actually end up spending a little bit more on our hair because we're at home. And then you've got your Amazon Prime, so you'll pay for that, and you'll also pay for your annual subscription. But the interesting thing is, because this is an annual fee, you'll only incur that in January, and in February and the other remaining months it's going to remain zero because you paid that for the year. And then let's say you still had your in-app purchases as well. So we can see that actually we've overspent on our fun and entertainment section by £15 because we've got a few more hair care stuff. So let's say we do end up spending a bit of money on our clothes. We spend the £50 we'd allocated, and then for extracurricular activities, although your child cannot do them, you still have to pay that out. So that might be a refund that comes later on that you can add on to that, and you pay zero because maybe you get the month refunded or anything like that, but you'd include that in the next coming months. Remember, you always plan for it, but the actual might look a little bit different. Then I say maybe you end up spending £15 because you're at home and you actually end up getting your kids a little bit more. And then let's say because we are in lockdown, what happens is, because we're in lockdown, we're going to have to get some homeschooling equipment. So this is something that actually is worth mentioning, because this is something that you didn't anticipate you would have to pay for, but it's a miscellaneous spend. So your budget is zero, but maybe you end up spending about £40 getting all pens, papers, all that stuff to keep your child engaged and continue with their education. So that's a spend that we need to incur, and that will include anything else that you find on your bank statement that you didn't expect but is in there. Include that in that miscellaneous area. So now you can see what we're actually left is completely different to what we budgeted. So we anticipated we would have £121 available, but there have been a few overspends that we did pay. So for example, the homeschooling, we spent a little bit on games for the kid, and we've also spent a little bit more on our hair care stuff. So that's something to flag up and to remember. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take that £51.53 and we're going to basically pay ourselves out. So the first thing I would do is I would always put less than £1, put it in the penny jar, put it in your generic savings, and then you're left with £51. Now I always say your emergency fund is the most important, so I would put £25 in there, and then the rest of the £26 I would maybe put £10 in my house deposit, and then I would put £6 in the kids' bank account, and I would put £10 in my investments. That's what I personally would do. You might do it slightly differently, but that's what I would do, and I would close that out. Now the interesting thing is, now when we go to the summary, we can see where there might be some overspend or underspend. So we anticipated our income would be at £1,982, but there was actually a £50 reduction because of our overdraft. And then our fixed expenses, we've actually saved money. We saved £40 on our fixed expenses, and that's because we didn't do takeaways and that really helped, and also we didn't use as much petrol as we thought we would. So that's something worth noting. And of course that can help you with planning out the next month as well. And then our savings, we're down £70 on our savings, so we're down 3.5%. So we can now see that actually, even though we budgeted 74% of our income to go towards our fixed expenses, we actually just a little bit less than the 74%. We overspend on our flexible expenses, so although we had only budgeted 19%, we actually ended up spending 23%. And our savings is the one that took the biggest hit. So although we had 6% budgeted, we only actually ended up saving 2.7%. Now there's an argument to be had whether or not you should actually do your savings before you do your flexible expenses, which I personally think is the right way to do it. You should definitely do your savings before you do your flexible expenses, but I just know that the reality for a lot of people is that it's the other way around, just because that's the way we've grown up and that's the way we've done things. And also the reality is miscellaneous things come up, and so instead of going into your savings accounts and dipping out for it, it's better to just pay for those miscellaneous things, and then whatever is left, you then allocate that towards savings. But the reality is you should try and do it the other way around. And so you basically, this is how I do it, and I do it for the entire year. I basically, once I finished my actual spend, I would now think about how I would budget based on that budget for February. Maybe I would look at this and think, whoa, I haven't saved as much as I can. I'm spending way too much on things I maybe shouldn't be. Maybe my hair care, I need to like think about whether or not I need to be spending extra on my hair care, especially since I'm at home. And so maybe I would want to take on a no spend challenge for the next month to drastically reduce how much it is that I am spending on different aspects. And so those are things that you can do, but as you fill that out, then you can actually start to see where there might be overspend. Maybe you might see a pattern. And for me, I'll be honest with you, when I did this for 2019, I noticed a sea of red when it came to things like clothes and coffees, because there's something else you could add in here as well as for fun and entertainment, is how much you end up spending on coffees as well. And I just saw a sea of red where I was constantly overspending way more than I anticipated. And so that gave me an understanding, wait, this is a growing trend and I need to basically cut that down. And so that's a quick glimpse of how I budget my money on a month by month basis, and I track how my spending goes against that budget each and every single month for the entire year. So I would highly recommend that if you are new to budgeting and you've not done a budget before, then why not pull out 3 to 6 months worth of bank statements, and then before you actually go through your bank statements, think about what money is coming in and how you would naturally like to budget your money in accordance to how much income is coming in, and then go through your bank statements and look at how that matches how you would like to spend your money. And then think about ways in which you can actually start to cut down some of your expenses and then start to save a little bit more money, especially if you are currently struggling with trying to save money throughout the year. This is just one of the tools that you could be using to get you to the point where you can reach some of your financial goals. So I hope in sharing that has helped you, that has encouraged you to do more budgeting, to think about different ways of budgeting and how it can actually help you not only reach your financial goals, but also highlight where you might actually need to change your spending habits and find ways, simple, quick, efficient ways to actually improve your financial position as well. If you're interested in how you can do that via frugal living tips, check out these videos which will show you everything that you need to know around frugal living and how you can start to save money really quickly by just shifting a few simple lifestyle habits. And until the next video, don't forget to hit that like button and to subscribe if you have found this useful, and don't forget to share this with somebody who is looking to make a positive impact on their finances. And until the next video, thank you so much for all your support. Do take care. Bye. Mwah.